In the chapter 16, we are going to discuss about the transaction control transformation, variable ports, sequential loop, parallel loading, scheduling, task link properties, event raise, event rate, and the workload. Now let us discuss a business scenario. That you are extracting the data from, let's say, source customer table and loading the data into STP customer table. Please observe the data. Please understand the data. Extracting the data from source customer and loading the data into STP customer table. So, while you are inserting or updating the data into the target table, so it is loading the data into the target table. Either it will insert or update the data, and also while inserting the data it will send a commit interval. So if you remember in the session properties, there is a commit interval. Commit type is target and commit interval 10,000. Means after every 10,000 records, commit has to be sent to the target database. It's called commit interval. So whenever you insert or update the records, after every 10,000 records, commit will be sent to the target table on which you are loading data. Now, look at it. You are going to extract the data from source, transformation, all that stuff you are loading in customer. Now, what happens in a business scenario? After it has loaded 5 records, session failed. Session has failed. Now let us assume that you put the commit interval at 5 records. After it has loaded the 5th record, session failed. Now then you go and try to understand why it has failed. Why did the load fail? Is it a data problem? Or is it an informatica server problem? Is it a network problem? Database problem? Study why it has failed. So, DBS will study it. Informatica support people study the informatica mapping. Go to the source database. See why it has failed. What is the data problem? Or if it was informatica server was up and running, or for XYZ reason, they try to find a solution for why it has. So they have identified that it is not a data problem, but was a table space problem. Now the DBA has extended the table space for that table in the database. Now the challenge. You have already loaded 5 records. Now where to start? Should I restart the load? From starting? Or should I start from which record it has failed? So it failed at 105, the data. It failed at 105 record. So it is a table space problem. So they extended the table space. Now where should I start from? Should I go to the source qualifier transformation and say greater than 104? Extract the data where customer ID is greater than 104. Then the problem is, if you say greater than 104, it will again extract it will not extract this 102 record. Actually, after 105, there is a 102 record. So if you say greater than 104, it will not extract this 102 record. But we need 102 also. Observe the data. It has loaded 101, 103, 107, 104, and 1. You see greater than 101, then 103, 104 already loaded. So you cannot say greater than 104 root. Now, then second option, remove the data from the staging table completely, delete it, and re-execute the mapping. This time consuming. Because assume there are 1 lakh records, at 800 to 1000, 80,000 records the data has failed, means about 79,999 records you have already loaded. Then you have to reload. If you delete the complete data in your target table, reload everything, time consuming. Or if it is a dimension table, it might have updated the previous data, so we cannot remove all the data from it. So remove the complete data and reload all the data, the dimension and fact tables. Then it is a time consuming. So this problem you face in projects in the production environment or in the support. Generally what they do is they delete the complete data in the dimension and fact tables, and from the backup they reload it till the previous day and reload everything. It is a very time consuming process. So solution for this. If we can fetch the data in the order by based on customer ID and load the data, and commit based on customer ID, if you do it, then it is a tedious process. It is for every record it will go and commit the data based on the customer. Or the second solution, extract the data based on the order by on dealership ID and commit whenever the dealership ID changes. Commit whenever the dealership ID changes. If you commit it on customer ID, every record is a unique customer ID. So rather than that, I commit when I load the data, whenever the dealership ID, based on dealership ID change, I will commit it. That is what is called as a transaction control. So, you fetch the data based on order by, based on dealership ID. Order by based on dealership ID, you extract the data from the. Now you load the data into the staging table. Now commit is based on transaction change on dealership ID. Means whenever the dealership ID is changed, we will commit it. So after 106, record is loaded, we send a commit. So in the target database, when the dealership ID 10 changes to 20, after 106 customer ID, 106 customer ID, there is a change in the dealership ID, I sent a commit interval. So till dealership ID 10, data is committed. Now next set of data is getting loaded, 10320 and 107. When 107 is getting loaded, let's assume session failed. So already data is committed till dealership ID 10, we are safe. Now we know that 107 failed. How do I know it failed? You open the session log file and study it and go to the target database, see what data it has committed. Then studying the session log, we understand that 107 has failed. Now you rectify the problem and you, that 107, there is some problem in the data, so you rectify it. Now from where you are going to load the data now? You say the source qualifier where dealership ID is greater than 10, extract the data. Then you execute again. So there is no problem of dealership ID 10 already loaded, committed, fine. So this way, you already loaded 5 records of 1 till 106. So at 107 it failed. So you start again at greater than 10. So it will start at 103. Then when after 20th dealership ID data is loaded, then it will send a commit to the target table and the 30th dealership ID data process. This way you don't need to take a backup or restart executing from the starting of the data. Set it up at the commit interval based on the transaction of data loading in the target. To manage this, that whenever the dealership ID changes, send the commit interval into the target table. This is transaction based commit. Whereas in the session, you have observed it in the session, it is number of records loaded into the target table. 10,000 records means after 10,000 number of records loaded. But what we are discussing here is whenever there is a change in the transaction data on a particular field, you need to commit it into the target. So to make this happen, Informatica provides you with a transformation called transaction. The purpose of transaction control is to send a commit to the target table. That we will see now using the mapping which we have already created of loading data from source customer to customer SP. So if it fails at 107, you override the SQL override and say where dealership ID is greater than 10, it will start extracting the data next time when you run this. This way you will not lose time, or you don't need to delete the previous data, take the backup and all that stuff. You can restart your session. We'll take the example of the mapping 6 of the business case which we have done. Now we load this. Now one thing you have to observe is, before you do the commit, you have to have based on based on the dealership ID, sorting on dealership ID. Because you want to load when based on dealership ID you extract or sort it. Whenever there is a change in the dealership ID, you need to send a commit. That commit is done by the transaction control. It will send a commit to the target. That is a functionality of transaction. So the organizations go into the projects. When the session fails, you have to identify where it has failed, then the reason for the failure, and rectify the problem. If you anywhere in the world any program fails, they will do this. But the challenge for us in projects is where to restart the loading process. We rectified the problem. Should I restart? But where? If my commit is done based on the number of records loaded, then I have a problem. If it fails at the last of my loading, then where to start? One solution is to delete the complete data and restart. This is very time consuming process. And also there is a problem. If it is HCD type 2 dimension table, already some records are updated, some records are inserted. Then in that case what we do? We truncate the table, that is delete the data from the table, complete data. From the backup, we copy the data back to the table and restart the row number, record number 1. It's time consuming process. Rather than we'll restart, but we will change the commit. Commit is not based on the number of records, but based on a transaction data. That is in our case, whenever there is a dealership ID changes, by loading, send a commit to the target. So we are sure that this data is deleted, committed, then next time we'll extract from there whichever dealership ID is. But how to send this commit intervals based on the change in the dealership IDs? For that, Informatica provides with a transformation called transaction control, which sends only the commit based on our condition. Now let's take the example of our 6th mapping. We have done I rename this edit copy. I'll rename this to keep it as a backup for us. We have done already. But I will do it on 6 customers. Now till filter, the logic is perfect. Now we need to extract, sort by dealership ID first. If you don't sort it, then you commit it whenever there is a change. But when you restart it, you will have a challenge. So I will sort the data based on the dealership ID. So I'll create a transformation called sorted transformation. And sort it on dealership ID. The key of dealership ID. Now, the purpose of transaction control is to send a commit interval, commit statement. This transaction level should I commit, or what? Will only do commit. Send a commit to the target. Functionality of a transaction. But in this we have to build a logic. What is the logic we have to build it? When should we ask the transaction control to send the commit? Whenever there is a change in the dealership ID. Informatica process row by row record. Whenever there is a change in the dealership ID, you need to send a commit. For that purpose, when is changed, when the row is changed to different ID, to capture that we use expression transformation. Please understand this logic very carefully. This is called expression transformation, which I will build the logic for you. We sorted it. Now we have to identify when this dealership ID changed. Now I'll create a port called flag. So I make it as a variable. I'll explain you the logic. Now I'll introduce to the variable ports. The purpose of variable ports is like a local variable for programming. To simplify your complex expressions, Informatica provides you with a port called variable. It is local to that transformation only. It initializes. Whenever you define a variable port, it has to be initialized. Like a count is equal to count plus 1, and in a programming you find that count is initialized to 0. Then you use count is equal to count plus 1. Like that, here also you use variable. It initializes by itself. Starts. But it will remember previous values also. Like in any traditional programming, what you do. Like in any programming, you say declare, let's say count, declare variable as integer, say 0. Just don't go by the syntax. Say begin, then you say count is equal to count plus 1. Some loop. And you write some program insert in and end loop based on some condition. So what will happen? First time when it goes here, it will count will contain what value? 0 plus 1. That is 1. Now next loop comes second time. What will happen? Count will contain 1 plus 1. Then it becomes 2. Next time the loop, then it will be 2 plus 1. So this count variable remembers previous, just the previous process, just previous what is the value it is. So same way in Informatica, variable ports remember previous values like your local variable and then initialize this automatically. But you cannot take this value out. Variable port value you cannot take it out. It has to be reassigned to a output. So not take a variable data out. It has to be reassigned to a. That is the functionality of variable. Now coming to this transaction control, please observe here. I created a port called flag variable port, and to this dealership ID old, I assigned dealership ID. Now in this flag, I'll write a functionality called if dealership ID is equal to dealership ID old, then the flag field put 1. If it is not equal, this is if then else if condition. If this condition is not true, put it in the flag 0. This field 1 or 0. Then it will put value 1 when these two dealership ID and dealership old values are same. It will put 1. The condition fails, it will. Now as I cannot take the variable port out, so I assign to a flag out. So this flag out may contain 1 or 4. May contain 1 or 4. Now I'll come some more explanation I'll give you. Now I'll introduce transaction control. Tax for transaction is First I'll take this flag out into this, then dealership ID, then the remaining columns, and I connect dealership ID and all the other columns. Customer. Now in this transaction control, now I'll write the functionality. If a flag out is equal to 1, this is a functionality which are the different functionalities Informatica provides you. Transaction control. See continue transaction. Continue, don't send a commit in. If the flag out is not 1, that is 0, then send commit. The target. That is the functionality commit. Send the commit before I load this record. Not empty. So how it works? Just let's put this is written in the transaction control properties. Now from your expression transformation, what is the scenario? You have a dealership ID. You have a flag out tag. This will be 1 or 0. Then the flag out, we are assigning you the flag. Then dealership ID, bold, I said, we assign the dealership column field. Variable port, variable. Now when the first record comes in, that is dealership ID 10, that is the input. Take the data please. From your source, got first record of 10. This is your variable port. The order of the evaluation of the Informatica server at runtime is, first it will evaluate the input ports, then variable ports, then output ports, first in a transformation. So input port 10. In the flag, what is the condition we have given in this flag? Dealership ID. Set dealership hold. Then it is 1. So this is a variable port. What is the value in this dealership which you have assigned it, the dealership ID first time. This will not contain any value, the variable port. So first variable port it will check is not equal to 0. So not equal, so this will have output of this variable port is 0. So it will be assigned to the flag out 0. Before it output port it works, then it will go to this variable port. Then your dealership ID will have 10. This 10 is equal to this 10. So the flag is 1. Then output port only will have 1. Then it will send 1 to your transaction control. Now it sends to the transaction control. In the flag out will be value 1. If it is 1, continue transaction means continue loading process. So it will load the first record. Then the second record comes in. Second 10. In the dealership ID, variable will also have 10. Previous value is 10. 10 is equal to 10. Flag is equal to 1. Then that 10 is assigned to this dealership ID. So second record is inserted. Continue. Like this it goes on loads. Then when 103 comes in, your dealership ID will contain 20. Then variable port will have dealership ID 20 equal to old value, what it will contain to that previous 10. Then it will return, this flag will return 0. Variable port cannot be taken out, so you put a 0 to this. Then that record, what record will go into the target table? 103. I am talking about this record 103. The transaction control, it will be 103 with flag out is 0, 103, 20 the data. So if flag out is 0, what you should say? Commit before. Commit before means before this record 103 record of 20 dealership is loaded, this transaction control will send a commit to the target. Then by this time this dealership ID will have 20. Next record comes in, process 20 is equal to 20. So it will return 1. So continue. Like this it goes on. Then when 102 comes in, this dealership ID will contain 30. Input will contain, the variable port will remember previous value. 30 is equal to 20. There is a change. So it will return 0. If it is 0, then after it, before it loads, what it will have 0, 102, 30, talking about this record. So it will commit. And finally, the last record when it loads, it goes and commits the record. Target. So this is how a transaction control works. So I'll do it once again for you. You also need to do it underscore HTTP mapping, transformation, create, first sorter, because we need to sort the data. On dealership ID. So from dealership ID to version. So on dealership ID, we sort it. Then get a transformation called expression. get the data into expression transformation. Here what you have to track the logic of whenever that record has been changed. So I create a port called flag, make it as variable port. Please write it down. And flag out, make it as output port only, and assign the port variable port called flag to this. Then dealership ID out or old, I'll put it as old or previous, or I'll put old. Make this also variable port, and in the flag you write the logic. Write it down somewhere. This dealership ID is equal to, if you hold 1, 0. Then create a transaction control. First drag the flag out, then dealership ID. From customer question, from this dealership ID question we are going to target. Then in the transaction control, write it as. So now I'll create the transaction control. Be careful here. Flag, variable port, flag out port, dealership ID old. To assign the dealership ID, assign the dealership ID to old, variable port, flag, dealership ID, comma 0. Then transformation state, transaction control. Take first the flag out, the dealership ID, all the other columns, transformation, target, ID, double click, property, write the syntax. If flag out equal to 1, comma, tables, built-in, continue, comma, or commit. Syntax I'm talking about. If flag out is 1, continue transaction, else commit the transaction control. Write it down this functionality. I hope you have written this. Then let us go to the change that is up, cleared out this flag assigned to flag out error. Go back, create a flag out dealership ID old, assign to the dealership ID, dealership old, assign dealership ID, then dealership ID is ID old 1 comma. Then for flag out, assign this flag. Then I'll go back to the, I'll drag my customer information. Observe this properties. Commit a type. There are 3 types of commits: source, target, or user defined. You are defining the commit intervals. When the record changes dealership ID, you are doing it. So whenever, how are you going to do that? By using transaction. Whenever you use the transaction control, commit type becomes with another system I am talking about. Properties, commit type, source based commit, target based commit, user defined. So user defined commit is when you are in transaction control. Automatically it becomes user defined. Then I will load the mapping. So I load, I delete the data in my page. Now let me execute this. How do I know how it's committed down? First dealership ID, first 111 requested, then next 343, then the dealership ID, just committed. So if you go to the staging and execute the table for dealership ID, first one, many records are there, 111. So after it has loaded the dealership ID 111 records, it is a defined commit. Then let us see how many records for the next dealership ID, that 32. Then total 1 plus 232, 340. It is cumulative. That's the so the way the transaction